And a lot of people are stuck in the caveman software, the amygdala, reactive part of the brain.
Yeah.
And once you understand your internal dynamics,
Yeah.
and you go, there is no woolly mammoth. This is just a reaction.
Yeah.
This is a trigger. Once you start to catch things early, you start to change those patterns.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Army of Great Men podcast. Really excited today to have my new friend Carl Heath with us today. Carl's got a really interesting background. We're going to hear all about it, and we're going to learn what it takes to raise great men and how to embrace masculinity and how to be strong. Right, Carl?
Yeah.
All right.
You know, for me, my journey has really been one of, I would say, emotional confusion. So, kind of born in 1968, and this is a story I share. Dad left before I was born, so I didn't have that father figure in my life from the beginning, and that's where the separation starts to come in. So, about the age of 5, my mum was, I had a stepbrother and a stepsister who was fostered at birth. But by the age of 5, I was staying in a mental hospital with my mum and my young brother, and my mum wasn't very well, and she was on heavy medication, and she'd had 8 sessions of electric shock treatment. They were doing,
Jeez.
they would, and you know.
And you're there for this when you're 5 years old?
Oh yeah, I can remember periods of it where you kind of, you remember moments. I remember my stepdad going to sea as a chief engineer, but I just remember going through the foster system where I was potentially going to be living here, living there, because my mum couldn't take care of me and my brother. So I ended up in a children's home for 9 years. And in that process, it was...
And when you say children's home, like, is this like an orphanage? Is that what you mean?
like an orphanage, but an orphanage is more if you lose your parents, you
Right.
know. So a children's home was where if your parents are struggling, so if your parents were struggling back then, they would take you into a children's home, and then you would be in the system.
Got it.
So I grew up in the system, and for 9 years I grew up in the system. It was a different world, you know. And I would say, the emotional confusion of all the control, the rules, the regulations, going to, I call it education because a lot of people don't get out the information to the inspiration.
Sure.
That's where we get stuck in the classroom of the mind, I call it. So I kind of grew up in the church as well, Sunday school. So it was, it was all about Jesus and, just singing hymns on a Sunday and Christmas plays. But after 9 years, I was kind of, I was done. I went home to live with my mum and my stepdad, and left school, started a new school. And you know what it's like when you start a new school. You got to kind of, develop a reputation. So, but at school I was a sportsman. I played sport every weekend.
Sure.
Playing soccer, and I was a long distance runner as well.
Wow.
And I think that's what brought a lot of self-reliance for me was when I was running. I loved running. So anyway, I carried on playing soccer on a weekend. We call it soccer over here, football back in the UK. and for me, I just switched off in my last year at school. I was done. I was done with sitting in classrooms. I was done. I ended up on the street. I was smoking weed, doing drugs, magic mushrooms.
And so you're what, 16, 17?
16, around 16, yeah. You you've no desire to learn anymore.
Sure.
You're done. You're confused. And for me, I just went to the streets and, was selling drugs and fighting and going to the nearest nightclub, with saying I was 18, So you're kind of growing up quick. It's survival of the fittest on the street. But what I started doing was playing soccer in a men's league.
Sure.
So I still played.
Give you something to do.
Yeah, I played on a weekend right throughout. And what happened was I started getting knocked about a bit by men. And what happened was I would fight because I had a lot of aggression. I would fight, and I got banned from playing.
Right.
But when I got banned from playing soccer, that's when I lost my energy and my confidence. I stopped running, stopped training, and I kind of spent a lot of time on my own. And that's when I went through depression.
Sure.
Anxiety and depression and just really confused about life. And in that process of being confused. I remember just having sleepless nights, and one morning I didn't sleep. It was about 5 o'clock. The light came in through the curtain. I put my trainers on. I was feeling heavy. I just went for a run. And I just remember it was like reconnecting with that body that felt free.
I don't know if you know the name, but there was a guy who was a mayor in he was the mayor in Regina, a guy named Pat Fiacco, who had a boxing background.
Okay.
With your boxing, you may have crossed paths with him. But so Regina is where I grew up, and man, crime was just like right out of control. A lot of youth crime. We had this gang. It was called the Oldsmobile Gang, and they would go steal Oldsmobile cars. They're easy to steal. And the Leader Post had articles every weekend about the Oldsmobile Gang strikes again, and all these cars are getting stealing and joyriding and all that shit. And then Pat Fiacco got elected, and he said, we're going to create a midnight basketball league, and that's what we're going to do to keep these kids busy. Because all these stats about when kids play, for every hour a week that a kid plays an organized sport or an organized activity, the chances of them, getting in trouble just goes down exponentially. And when you take that away from these kids, they lose their purpose, right? Like when you're a kid, like all you care about is soccer or football or basketball or whatever it is, right? You just want to play a game. You want to get out there and do it. And it's also like, it's really good for you to, get that blood pumping. So it doesn't surprise me.
You kick the ball against the wall. And I remember before technology, you would be out for hours walking.
Oh God.
And you was kind of more grounded. You was more grounded and more kind of in the moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And for me, the streets was survival of the fittest because, I look back at people who never made it. And all the different stories. And I share that in my book, survival of the fittest, life lost on the street, survival of the fittest. And I was fit. So when I got back in to my running and my training, this is when I went through a mental breakdown. And the emotional breakthrough was I went from feeling heavy to then feeling high. And feeling high was really, I was connecting to something.
Right.
And it was like I had the Jesus experience. And it was like, I'm looking around and it was like I could see through the matrix. I saw what I was seeing was wrong.
Yeah.
And I needed to take control of my life. So there were certain values that was instilled.
And so this is what, you're like 17 at this stage, 18?
Yeah, 17 at this stage. And it was like I had the Jesus experience, but Jesus was the gateway to spirituality. But I connected to something that was powerful.
Sure.
And for me, it was the universe because it was like I reconnected. It was like rescuing the inner child.
Sure.
From the matrix of things, the thinking. And I went on, 35 years as a sportsman, coach and mentor. So I ended up playing semi-professional soccer and then I moved on to box amateur and professional. But during this period, I went through a couple more breakdowns and breakthroughs through drug culture.
Oh.
Because drugs ain't going to leave you alone.
No.
If you want to go party, drugs ain't going to leave you alone. So you have to replace drugs. And like I say with human biology, is get high on your own supply. So when I got into boxing, that's when I had my greatest shift. That's when I started to feel high. And I stopped because I was fighting. I stopped going out and smoking. I would go out and use dancing and movement. And because I was a coach as well when I was playing semi-professional soccer, I coached in America and I coached in Australia.
Oh, interesting.
So I was good at delivering part learning. And the big thing for me, Adam, was when I went into a school around 1997, I started connecting with kids I could relate to, who were coming from broken homes. And
because you could look at a kid from broken home and go, "Hey, I was there."
Absolutely. So when you're in your heart and you've done that work, kids, they've got radars. They know.
They can tell.
They know if you
kids are the best bullshit detectors of anybody.
Absolutely. BS meters.
They know.
So I started to look at these kids that were switched off and I started to realize that they were switched off, that the right brain absorbs sensory information and that a lot of kids get stuck in the left brain.
Sure.
And it was just fascinating. I started studying brain gym and then I started to incorporate it into boxing and movement, but without contact. It was a release. So I started that in 1997. And what I started to notice was a lot of young men were being medicated for ADD.
Sure.
Or ADHD, and I always I kind of share this in my book, Activate Flow, Releasing the Power Within, is that I had ADD, I had attention to a deeper direction, which was really for me that I could see outside the box and that whole system and matrix of things didn't have a grip on me because I was on a different adventuring journey, and I had that energy, and I knew how to source that energy through movement, through running.
Interesting.
And through the breakdowns I would go through, I always knew I would need to go running. Go and have a meeting with myself, go get space.
So your physical therapy became your mental and spiritual therapy.
Absolutely. And I got OCD as well, uncommitted and driven. So it was interesting how I started to look at schools and work with kids, and I was getting kids off medication. I was getting them into movement. Movement is medicine. So I used to say to them, come to the gym. So I started to use
and that started in 1997, you said?
1997 I started, and then I got into mainstream schools, and I started, really, it was fascinating because it was when the video games were coming out.
I was just going to say.
Behavior started to change in schools.
Yeah.
It was getting worse. And I started the correlation of going, these kids are playing video games, and then they're coming into school and certain behaviors.
They have no outlet.
No outlet, but it was like I called it an infectious, contagious virus of bad attitude and behavior.
Yeah.
Now I could work with that because I was from the street, and I got the respect being a boxer as well. But I could look at these kids and see the character.
Yeah.
And I started working with the Youth Justice in 2000s, and just youth projects, sharing my story, sharing my journey, and just getting these young people moving. And just, if they were going to the prison, it's not a prison, I said it's a babysitting service.
Yeah.
It's a warehouse for damaged stock, and you need to repair, damage and repair. You got to get control over your life. I said, and that's what I've done, is built character, built real character.
Yeah.
So, but what boxing did for me was gave me really a purpose to share with kids and go on the journey.
It's funny, right? Like, I think most people, my generation and like you and I are roughly the same age, and like we look at what our kids are doing today, and like you can sort of point to, well, this is what's wrong with youth, and this is what's wrong with, and the truth is there's not just one thing. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that in terms of just the way that kids are raised now, and the culture of that kids are growing up in, they really are being suppressed in a lot of ways, and all the things that make them tough and grow and all that stuff. But one of the things, when I grew up, Nintendo was a thing or whatever, but like you'd play it for a bit, you'd get tired of it. Like you didn't play that stuff all day.
No.
You played for half an hour, you'd die, you'd lose your last man. You go, well, shit, I'm not going to start all over. I'll go, I'm going to go outside. And now the way these games are designed is they'll play them for 12 hours straight and then go, holy shit, where'd the day go?
Yeah.
And as a result, like, youth sports numbers are way down. Organized activities are way down. All these things are way down. It's not healthy for kids to be cooped up all that time. They have no outlet. They have nothing to, they've no what you
release.
Talked about. They have no release.
And for me, Adam, it's what I've done for a lot of years. So I represent, working at every different level, be it with the alternative learning and creating an alternative learning program, to working within mainstream schools where kids were kept in schools but put in units. Mm-hmm. So we call them transition units, working with youth projects. That there was that much going on with young people that the funding around it was huge. But yet, when you looked at the, video games like Grand Theft Auto, I would be like, why are people not seeing how bad this
so
negative influence is? And it's got worse and worse over the years.
Yeah.
So if you're a product of the environment and you're experiencing the world through your senses and you're watching a lot of this, especially with Fortnite and the games, Roblox that's out now, it's brain draining for kids, but it's also, it's subliminal messages that's in there as well. You've got bananas with guns shooting. Yeah. They know exactly what they're doing. And I share this in my book as well. They're called attention engineers that work in Vegas. They know how to get your attention. They know how to get a grip. And what it is a sensory hijack.
Yeah. Well, and they reprogram you when they do that.
Big time. Yeah. Big time. So my passion is really about youth and, getting youth moving. But it's just that we've lost generations of kids. And, when we look at the topic of young men, it's It's tough.
It's an epidemic.
And it's for me.
Yeah.
It's annoying because you go these kids that I look at is they're like little space cadets.
Yeah.
They're not switched on. They're not focused. You can get them there, but it's so much harder with everything that's going on in the world. But let's not forget there was an epidemic. I mean, I'm part of a movement called Empower to Recover,
Yeah.
trauma, mental health, and addiction. There was an epidemic before 2020 of people suffering and overdose and suicide and mental health. And then what's happened over the last 4 years is just compounded.
Oh, for sure.
And, you know, I look at what's happened to children's schools ended up like asylum units.
Yeah.
So you look at, you know, what our kids have had to go through from a trauma perspective, but the generations we've lost, you know, and you want to get onto the topic of men.
Yeah.
And man has lost his way for sure.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's a difficult time. And I'm not the perfect man. I'm still going
Nobody
through
is.
the process.
Yeah.
I've taken the long journey, and my passion is about, you know, working with youth, inspiring, empowering. But you know, it's about family. It's about community. So the domino effect of my life has took me so far out, but
Yeah.
I've come back in.
Yeah.
And I'm open to learning, doing the deep dive and growing.
It's important work, man. It's like it really is. I mean, God, it's just and you know, as we said, there's not one solution, right? There's loads of solution, and the truth is, it's going to take mentors like you out there working with kids one at a time, hoping it becomes contagious and hoping that it spreads to more.
Well, you know, we've got entitlement and we've got the victim mentality as well. We've got the wounded child, the wounded soldier on the invisible battlefield. You know, when you talk about an army of great men, is what's really interesting for me at this moment is seeing how lost people are, but how people are showing up.
Yeah.
And how they show up is not showing him how inconsistent or what they're doing.
Yeah.
To really kind of get a grip on life, you know what I mean? It's just fascinating because there's never been a more difficult time to recover than the last 4 years.
Absolutely.
But this is why we got to bring people together. But men, you know, I see you straight away today when I come and I came in here, Adam, and it's like it's good to be around strong men.
Sure.
And I'm around strong men, and they'll call you out.
Absolutely.
And they'll see through it.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah.
I love it because it's transparent.
Yeah, it's well, and as you and I were talking before we sat down, it's you know, it used to be that, you know, anytime you were around, like 30 years ago, you're around a group of men, you'd feel like, oh, I'm with a bunch of strong men. And you know, I think for a lot of reasons that's becoming less and less frequent. And you know, the funny thing is, I don't even think men are aware of it. Like the ones who are lacking that, I don't even think they know it. The women sure recognize it though, right? Like when you know, I've talked to so many women last year about their perspective on just the status of men in the world. And, you know, like they're just like the number of high quality masculine men, it's just like they're getting harder and harder to find. And that's a scary concept, you know, for a whole bunch of other reasons, right? I mean, if you want to get really deep in all this stuff from a societal perspective, you know, if you wanted to take over a society or take over a group of people, the first thing you'd do is you'd neuter the men, right? That's the first thing you'd do. And from a societal perspective, men have been gradually being neutered, you know, both literally and figuratively. I mean, shoot, just look at the testosterone levels, right? Like low testosterone has become an epidemic in the male community, right? That wasn't the way before. That was not the way at all. And, you know, even a couple episodes ago, I had a woman named Melissa Ramos on who talked about hormones and hormone imbalances. And, you know, you don't need to look at studies of, you know, the levels of testosterone and things like that to just see it. Like you can just see what's going on, and then it manifests in other ways, right? Like, I mean, shit. I guarantee you know somebody in their 40s who has prostate cancer. Guaranteed you can think of somebody. 20 years ago, You didn't know anybody prior to the age of 60 that would have prostate cancer. Pretty soon they're going to be in their 30s, right? Well, prostate cancer can only present itself when testosterone levels are low. So this isn't like, this is an epidemic that's affecting this level and this level and this level and this level. It's a dismantling
over time.
For sure.
And, like I said about, just having that vulnerability to be human and to be aware of when you're in your head and when you're in your heart, and to develop that emotional awareness and heart-mind intelligence is where us men are challenged.
Totally.
Because, life gets intense, life gets challenging, and you've got to move and weave through a lot of emotion, energy, emotion.
Yeah.
And to be open to that and take ownership of that and to do your work, it's a big ask. And like I share is there's a lot of surface dwelling.
Yeah.
With society and just the times we're living in with social media, pain, swipe. A bit of deep dipping, but there's not enough deep diving.
So, and this is one of the other, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because, and I'm sure you've got some ideas on solutions. And I know you've worked with some kids and helped them sort of grow and see all this stuff. But from a higher level, we've taught all these kids that adversity is something you run from. If it's hard, it must be bad, right? And the only way to learn what you just described is you got to go through some shit. You got to face some shit. And you got to dig deep and, go through some painful stuff and face the stuff you don't want to face. So when society is programming all these kids that you run from adversity at all costs, right? It starts like right from the time they're 4 years old, where, everybody gets a medal because you can't hurt anybody's feelings for not winning, or you can't fail a kid in school. And, so we're programming these kids right off the bat that adversity is bad and we're going to shield you from it. Yeah. Well, then how do we expect them to grow when they encounter pain in their life and grow into the kind of man that you're just discussing? How do we expect these kids to do that when they've been programmed to run from pain at every angle?
Where I come from is, and what I share as well, is that we're running the old caveman software, the freeze, the flight. Yeah. So freeze is we learn to shut down. So we develop patterns of behavior from a young age.
Right.
We tend to throw our toys out the pram, or we kind of develop behaviors that we don't realize. That, as we grow up, we still have these certain behaviors where we avoid. So we flight. We don't want to face something. Now, it's all right to kind of not face something at a time and then face it later.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't know they're in freeze, flight, or fight when we get resistant.
Yeah.
And sometimes being resistant and calling stuff out and having an uncomfortable conversation can work. I always say if it blows, it allows us to grow, And at the end of the day, it's better out than in. But it's understanding reaction from response, and that the human experience is when you understand the head, the freeze, the flight, the fawn, the freeze, the flight, the fight, and the fawn. The fawn is the worst when we hide behind emotion,
right?
And we don't want to face things, and then we become somebody. We're not true to ourselves. Yeah. And when I say about human technology, when we're bright and you're in your heart and you're aware of your true power, and you're willing to move through the weave of life and learn from, for me, the last 12 years, I've been in adversity. I came here, I lost everything in the UK, and I came over here to be with my son.
Wow.
My son's 11 now, and he took me on the deeper journey.
Wow.
And that's where my book came in, My book came in when I went through that process. And 18 chapters, 18 when I woke up, but 6 was when I went in the children's home. So I've come and done the deeper healing all the way from England, and had an amazing, because stress is a powerful energy that can be honest. I'm talking to kids today.
It's rocket fuel.
But they don't know what stress is. So when you talk about emotional awareness, kids don't understand that, dealing with your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, the stress is not a bad thing. No. It's only when you don't learn to process through your thoughts.
Sure, it builds up and you snap. Yeah.
Exactly. So when you're feeling uncomfortable, Adam, and we're having a conversation, the ego can get in the way.
For sure.
Oh, that hurt. And I always say is that the ego it takes itself serious. And it's always offended.
Yeah.
And when you start to kind of, work that kind of way, you've got to be able to have a sense of humor. You got to stay in your heart. You got to be strong. You got to be, you know, purposeful in your day. You got to go out and spread the love.
Yeah.
And that's that kind of strength that a man has. And, you know, and I learn more about myself as I go through this last year has been really intense, and it's been really interesting to observe, but move through the weave of emotion. But when you do that deep dive, that's where the treasure is.
So let's talk about your deep dive. Like, you know, obviously you had an upbringing that, you know, most people listening to this are not going to relate to, right? Like a very unique upbringing.
Yeah.
Saw stuff that, you know, like you'd never want your son to have to go through, right?
Yeah.
As much of like you harness that pain to become the man you are today, it's a gift in that sense, but still you'd rather avoid, you know, the next generation having to go through all that
Absolutely.
stuff. Yeah. So how did you heal? Like, what was your process? Like, what did you do? How'd you face it?
I think first and foremost, when I had my breakthrough in 1985, when I kind of rescued the inner child, that meant that, you know, I was getting out of the system and I was going to find my way, and I was going to work different jobs. If it was tomato picking, roofing, I was going to go. I found a way to just really see life as an adventure, and working on the doors. And even when I went through the drug culture and lost myself, it was crazy, but it was a process to move deeper into that heart space and learn more about me.
Yeah.
And when I went on that journey, you know, my epiphany was when I started working with kids. When I worked with kids,
probably saw you in them.
I found my calling.
Yeah.
As soon as I found my calling, it was like, wow, that was a healer straight away, that I could now work in a school, because the headmaster who spoke to me, who run the school, he spoke to me when I was 17 because he worked as a coach at the professional club.
Right.
And he allowed me to go in the school, and he was like, Carl, and I set up a little area with punch bags at the shed at the back of the school. Where kids could release. I had flashcards, release, express yourself, let it all go. So I had a kind of very creative way, an expression. How did I get from there to there? I knew sport had played a role, but boxing was the greatest shift I had.
Sure.
Because it activated whole brain function.
Oh, I bet.
And I started to study human biology and human technology, that thoughts are electric, emotions are like frequencies. And we all give off a vibration. So I kind of started getting into the concept of frequencies in the early 2000s with David Hawkins, who was all about human calibration. So you start to go, oh, wow, frequencies, vibrations. It was like, so my work energy-wise, University of Life is energy-wise, the universe, energy, frequency, vibration, the University of Life. So everything, we are your energy, frequency, and vibration. So what is your vibe saying about you, you know? And a lot of that, you know, a lot of the last 4 years, I think, as well, which has made a big impact on people, is the fear.
Sure.
And fear for me was something I dealt with as a fighter and moved through as a process. And I would say the last 4 years, I've never been more creative.
Wow.
In my life, everything has kind of peaked to a point. I'm writing books, I'm creating, my work is evolving. I'm going on a tour, you know, across Canada to support people, trauma, mental health, and addiction.
Wow.
It's empowering. So, you know, it is, life's a journey. So the healing aspect is doing the inner work. And over the years, I would go to shamanic sweat lodges in Germany, and I would, because I was being successful with my work and passionate about creating change, I would go to Lake Bala and go on a vision quest, go fasting for 3-4 days. Then I would go to seminars and just get up and heal, do some healing work, family constellation. So I was just, healaholic, like I said. Yeah. I've always been about going where that pain is and just going there and just feeling it through, because we don't feel enough through. We just think it. We try and think it through. You got to feel it through.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, right? Like anybody who ever does that inner self work, sometimes they'll go, "Oh, I did it. I'm fixed," and then that's it, right? And they're done, right? Like it's like saying, "Oh, I went to the gym once. I'm in shape." You know. And then other people, they get addicted to that.
Yeah.
Right. Like you do the work and you're just like, oh my God, like let's go. I want more of this. Like, cause you get that,
But-
it's, you talk about a healthy, a natural high. You just get addicted
but
to
can
the
you be
growth.
productive with it? So for me, when I found my calling and I was a coach, I was teaching, and then I started working with Premiership soccer players, Great Britain Rugby League. I was around world champions as well.
Wow.
But that was because I had a concept and a message that was supported.
Sure.
People understood that people were starting to see the concept to release, moving energy, control, release, channel energy. And the flow, focusing that energy. So for me, the healing was the shift and going through the process. So like you said, people go, I'm healed.
Yeah,
So,
I'm good.
no,
It's just chapter one.
It's chapter one, man.
Yeah.
It's a new day, a new beginning. And if you're in reaction, quite often, if you get triggered and the intensity of the world that we're living in, if you do, it's going to show you something about yourself, and you've got to be vulnerable enough to go, okay, I own it. This is who I am. Everything's work in motion. That's why, for me, reaction to response is that the world of stress and overload and whatever you've got going on, if you're working all these hours, for me, I get up at like 3:00 in the morning.
Right.
And then I go to the gym and I'm working, and I'm kind of doing a lot at the moment. And I'm pretty kind of spaced out, or let's just say by the end of the day, and I go to bed.
Sure.
So you're tired, you're kind of fasting in so many ways. You're vulnerable for getting caught in situations. You've got to be able to, for me, stay in that flow, but you get disruptions in the flow.
Of course.
And that's what we're talking about for me, is just seeing how lost people are sometimes, and especially with young men. And I work with more young men that I work with. I help them develop a foundation and help them to see the reality of what's going on.
Right.
I go watch people drinking, watch people smoking, watch this, yeah? I'm not saying any of it's, just watch what it does. See how out of control people get?
Yeah.
Just watch. And it's interesting. I've not had a drink for 20 years.
Wow. Good for you.
So for me, I was, like I say, get eye on your own supply,
Yeah.
And just, I think doing the healing and spirit plants, and there's so many ways to recover and heal.
Well, and the truth is, like the things that you've been talking about, like, the sweat lodges and things like that. I mean, shoot, like our indigenous culture here. I mean, shit, they've been doing that for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
You think they don't know that this stuff works, right?
No.
But no, let's throw medication at it, and let's do this, and let's do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're calling it alternative, but it's the original. It's the original way.
Yeah.
We've just become kind of, and it's just with society and, the medical system. It's just easy to become a customer, a long-term customer. And at the end of the day,
it's easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the supply is limitless.
Well, you got a problem.
And you don't have to do anything. You don't have to
pill.
face anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, you're using something. And before you know it, you've got the, and that's what I'm saying. You're beside yourself. You're not really true to who you are.
Yeah.
And that's what is really, I would say, it can be frustrating to see people show up and then see through all of that, and they can't see it.
Well,
it's tough. It's
if
tough.
you can find something more frustrating, and I can tell you love the kids you work with. Like you love them the second they walk in the door. You love them.
Yeah.
I coach my boys' hockey teams, and I absolutely loved every one of those kids. Like when they were in the room, I loved every kid like they were my own. Absolutely loved them. And there's nothing more painful and frustrating as a coach when you can see the answer as clear as a bell, and they won't begin to see it.
Yeah.
They can't, right? And like if you're talking about a hockey drill or a boxing drill, where that's one thing. But when you're talking about somebody who's lost, somebody who's in pain, and you can see that there's a clear way for them to address that pain, but they're not going to do it, it's just heartbreaking. It's just hard. And then doctor's going to give them this, and mom's going to give them that, and dad's going to give them this drug, and you're just going to mask it, and you're in the system.
Yep, you're in the system.
And the more you do that, the deeper that hole gets, and the harder it's going to be to get out. It sucks. and I'm not saying there isn't a place for medication, right?
No,
Like if a kid's, if somebody, not a kid or an adult or anything, if they're bipolar or manic depressive, or like sometimes you need drugs, like sometimes you do.
Oh, yeah.
There's no question about it. Sometimes you need medication, but not always.
Not always.
And we are just so quick to just prescribe. I mean, we are the most overprescribed time in history. It's insane.
In 97, I started to realize kids were on Ritalin.
Oh yeah.
Kids were, and I was like, okay, but it was the way it was subsidized.
Sure.
It became a comfort to the parent to get it.
It's easy.
But the kid that I would work with and I would see, it was painful.
Yeah.
But it was so rewarding to see him change and to get a grip.
Yeah.
And just to get, especially with boxing, the way the endorphins, you just activate the senses, you feel high on those natural neurochemicals. It's just, it's a great way to move.
Yeah.
So when I started to teach kids that, and it'd be like before a session, after a session, they'd be like, ping.
Yeah. Light goes on.
Yeah.
I want more of that.
Release and recharge. It's not rocket science. But like I say, is that a lot of kids are captured in the system, and then a lot of adults go through pain because and I always say reactions to stress is one of the biggest reactions is comfort in the way we feel.
Sure.
And instead of having an outlet, changing the way we feel through exercise, we comfort the way we feel.
Yeah.
And then we don't move.
Yeah.
Then we just get caught up in this sedentary lifestyle of sitting down a lot.
Yeah.
And movement, no doubt, is medicine. And that for me is the greatest message, is that movement's medicine, puts you in your body, puts you more in your heart space.
Yeah.
It activates left, right brain, all brain function, which means is when you're the amygdala, the caveman, there is no woolly mammoth.
Right.
There is no woolly mammoth. Once you realize there's no woolly mammoth, it creates a gateway, part of the brain, to the prefrontal cortex to relax, do some critical thinking. And a lot of people are stuck in the caveman software, the amygdala, reactive part of the brain.
Yeah.
And once you understand your internal dynamics, and you go, there is no woolly mammoth. This is just a reaction.
Yeah.
This is a trigger. Once you start to catch things early, you start to change those patterns.
Sure.
And as men, and for me, like as a coach, I'm intense, and some days are long, and you catch yourself, and before you know it, you got a bit of work to do.
Yeah.
And when you can own it and drop into a space and go, okay, and that's how I was writing my book as well. Is I wrote a part called "Calling Out the Ego," which is really when some people struggle to communicate and want to have a certain attitude, and it's kind of the wounded child syndrome, you know what I mean? Certain patterns and ego, and sometimes you just got to call it out,
for sure.
Call people out, and then just see what they've got, see if they can actually engage in a conversation and be uncomfortable, be uncomfortable in the conversation, and go, okay, what's that brought up for me?
Yeah, and let them know it's okay to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely, it's okay to be.
That's where the good stuff is.
Yeah, don't become a victim of your circumstances. Just say, don't be a victim, get it out of your system.
Yeah.
There's only one way to get it out of your system, is to move and feel through your emotions, energy in motion. And that's what I'm big on, is really getting people moving.
Yeah. Love
getting back to the heart,
Love it. Okay. So let's talk about, like, obviously you're not going to use any names or whatever, but talk about some of the breakthroughs that you're the most proud of in terms of kids that you've mentored and coached. You have any good stories you can talk about what they were like when you got them, and because you've been doing this for a couple of minutes here.
Years, Well, when I used to get the kids come to the school. So first, I used to have a questionnaire. So I'd say, okay, when do you do any sport? Yeah, I used to play rugby. Okay, when did you stop playing rugby? About a year ago. Okay, so what's been going on since then? You've not had a release. And what else has happened? And I remember a kid said his grandpa. I said, did you lose somebody? Was there something that happened that impacted you? He said, yeah. I lost my granddad.
Yeah.
And I was really close. And I just remember in that moment, it's just, and I write about it in the book, it's just ping, ping, ping. The light bulb comes on, and it's like, right, get back in the gym.
Yeah.
We've got to move through the process. We've got to move this energy. And your granddad's watching you. And he'll want you to be strong.
Yeah.
Not to be weak. He'll want you to be strong. And you've got to break the chain.
For sure.
And take things to the next level. So let's get fit, let's get strong, let's get moving.
It's really powerful.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I
and isn't it amazing? Like you can look at that and go, like, that's just the most obvious thing in the world.
Yeah.
Right? Like you just look at it, like it might as well be tattooed on their forehead.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah. But when you're in that, you can't figure it out. And then it just compounds and gets worse and worse and worse.
It compounds, well, it builds up. And when I work with kids, I say, where do your thoughts and feelings go if you don't process them?
Yeah.
It's all about, everything's just a process. All these feelings, as uncomfortable as you can learn. Where do they go? And they go, they're in your body. You feel. This is where you got to feel through.
Yeah.
This is where you got to move the body. You got to have a release. Does that make sense? What's the difference between punching and releasing? Punching could be seen as something negative. Releasing is having an outlet for it. You need an outlet.
It's
okay to aggression.
I love the analogy of the river when it comes to this stuff. So the way it was explained to me once, which I thought was just brilliant, is if a river is flowing, if the water is flowing, the water's clean, right? What happens if you dam it up? It turns into a swamp, right? And that's our energy.
Yeah.
As soon as we stop that flow, as soon as we jam it up, what I think you turn into a swamp.
Yeah.
So I personally, like, a lot of the energy I work is with Reiki. I go for it. Like I exercise. I'm at the gym a lot. But that's kind of a new thing for me. I spent a lot of sedentary years.
I did Reiki around 2004. I went through so many energy healing modalities. I did Reiki. It was an amazing weekend.
Reiki's incredible.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I go, if you're out, if you're listening to this, Reiki is something that I would highly recommend. Find the right therapist, but it's tricky, right? And I've explained this before, but funny thing about Reiki is, like you could go to somebody and have a 10 out of 10 experience. I could go to that exact same person and not feel a thing because there's a chemistry to it. Like there's an energetic match to it. So,
true.
So, just like you have chemistry with different people or different, so you might have to try a few different Reiki therapists before you find the one that's really fit for you. But when you find that one, oh my God, it's like winning a lottery. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's like for me, doing the energy healing modalities, there was one called Blue, Beings of Light University. I met a guy who filled the room, transmitted energy into a room that it was just absolutely charged up. Yeah, in my hometown back in England.
Amazing.
And I've met people who can transmit from other dimensions that energy. So we're amazing human beings that are just, when you look at the five senses, the five sensory, that's kind of more the matrix.
Sure.
We're kind of influenced by what.
That's the surface stuff.
But the sixth sense that we have, that we're so gifted in so many ways, but yet so disengaged.
Yeah.
Once we find that power, once we activate our, I call it the human technology. You got three brains, your head, your heart, your gut. You got insight, you got your sixth sense, your third eye, and your in tune, intuition. So there's so many simple ways to actually express that and share that with somebody.
Well, it's funny how closed-minded people are about it.
Yeah.
But what's funny about it is the people who are closed-minded about it, like the people who go, whoa, like, I'm not gonna be able to figure that out.
Yeah.
But those same people could point to somebody and go, oh man, he's got great energy or she's got great energy.
Yeah.
So they can see other people, but they don't understand that in order to get that great energy, there's certainly a conscious decision to harness that energy. Like it took work to do it.
Absolutely.
And they think that, they're just lucky or whatever. That's something they work on. We all have to work on our energy.
Yeah. And for me, when I came to Edmonton in 2012, it was like it was here. The bandwidth, the space, the processing, the bandwidth was here. I could feel it. I go back to the UK and it was like cluttered.
Really?
Like a psychic density, because the UK, or let's just say Britain, it's a small rock with too many people on it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And unless you're in an affluent area, you're like a sardine.
Kind of jammed in, yeah.
So there's a real density there. When you come to Canada, there's so much space, supernatural. And when I first came here, it was like, wow, you're healing, you can become cleansed very easy by just taking a walk in the River Valley.
Absolutely.
You can feel
Yeah.
the supernatural.
Yeah.
Different to anywhere else I'd experienced.
Interesting.
So, yeah, very healing, very grounding, you know.
Yeah. Interesting.
And when you look at you know, energy work is more and more people now are open to it. I think over the last 4 years,
people are waking up.
Yeah, people are waking up, and people are becoming more conscious of, you know, there is a shift. There is a conscious shift, a collective shift in the energy, the frequency, and the vibration.
Well, it's because people talk about it now.
Yeah.
Like it's very, open. You know, it's very prevalent. I mean, shoot, like you listen to any of the, you know, like the top gurus out there, the people, you know, people would look at the, you know, the Tony Robbins, Joe Dispenza, even guys like, you know, Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson, guys like that. They all talk about, you know, energy and all, like they talk about it all the time. It's critical. Yeah.
And I think it runs through everything when it comes down to attitude, energy, behavior.
Yeah.
You know, there is an energy. And, you know, like, and I say, the friction in the kitchen creates fakery in the bakery. You know what I mean? There's a synergy. When you're in a synergy, you know, you relax and you feel a heart coherence that you're communicating on a different level. You're feeling, you're sensing more. Whereas, you know, you can see sometimes, you know, I just say sometimes people are on anxious FM. Fear FM, you know, and projecting instead of radiating. So it's just interesting. And that's why I express in my book as well, is I keep it simple, the dynamics. And I'm excited about promoting the book, but also promoting that life, the human experience can be so challenging.
And beautiful, but challenging.
So giving and nurturing and that vulnerability. And, you know, getting into the army of great men, I feel that there's an army of great men here.
Oh, they're everywhere.
But here around the people I know, there's an army of great men, and they're full of no nonsense as well. I like the older generation, the no nonsense, because they see through it straight away and they don't tolerate it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you got to be like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to be like that. You got to call it out, and you know that's really the truth of the matter. So with an army of great men, how did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it a little bit on the show, but in the early episodes. But yeah, I mean, it was just an idea that I had because you know, I went through some stuff last year. I had you know, I had a 2023 was a challenging one for me for sure. A surprise divorce, lost my mom, went from you know, my kids all stayed with me full time, so I went from working, you know, more than full time at a job to you know, making, you know, my kids my full time focus. And you know, I was really, really lucky and fortunate that I had so many great mentors in my life who were there to, you know, help me, right? Help show me, you know, focus on this and do this and don't get sucked into that. And, you know, they really were there to help guide me on my healing journey. And I went all in. Like I don't hide from pain. If it's there, I face it. And, you know, just in a lot of the work that I did, I realized that, you know, there's a lot of men that are, you know, they're really lost, and it's getting worse.
Yeah, they're getting broken. Worse and worse. They're so broken. They're so broken, and
one conditioned to run.
Yeah, exactly.
They're just conditioned to run
and hide. And, avoid. And absolutely.
I was one of the things that really hit home for me. You know, when I went to, I had to, you know, get a divorce. Okay, I guess I need a lawyer, right? And I'm calling around, and like most of the divorce lawyers in this town, it was like a 6-month wait just to get started because they're so busy. So like COVID, you know, you talk about some of the side effects of COVID. COVID was really good for the divorce industry. You know, there were a lot of marriages where, you know, you had couples that were, you know, cooped up in the same house for 2 years. You know,
that didn't work well.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that was the polarization. It was everything as well. Yeah,
and I think, you know, like on my personal thing, I think that was a contributing factor for sure.
Yeah.
But then just looking at all this and then thinking about some of the people that I know who, you know, they dealt with some pain in their life and they never recovered. Either, you know, they lost a loved one or got a divorce or a bad breakup or whatever. And, you know, everybody knows that guy who they encountered something tough and they just never recovered. They, you know, they turned to drugs and alcohol or whatever they did.
Yeah.
and they're lost. And, like I know a guy that died from that. Like he's never recovered. He's died. Literally drank himself to death. And, other people who, they just end up right in the ditch, and you just look at them and you go, well, shit, like maybe if they had the people around them that I did, maybe they would have, maybe their path would have been different. And so the idea of this show really was to start to bring the voices of people that men should be learning from to the forefront with the concept of embracing that strength, embracing masculinity. Pain is rocket fuel if you know what to do with it. Concepts like that.
It's
and
educational.
It's educational.
Pain. Once you move through the process, and one day at a time, we can get hit hard, or there's something that's moving in us. There's something that's triggered.
Absolutely.
There's something we need to learn, we need to grow, we need to own and be vulnerable in.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It's awesome.
It's having the space to do that, and it's the ability to be able to, the deep dive for me is when you're actually in tune.
Yeah.
When you're really in tune with your feelings, you're really in tune with, going out there into the world and feeling and connecting, and then go, okay, here's a lesson. It's a lesson I need to learn. I need to, and
what a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think that a lot of young men that are growing up in this consumerism of social media are so distracted.
Oh, they don't even know what ends up.
Exactly. So when you talk about doing the deep dive, it's like, they think you got to go to the local pole, put your trunk. No, doing a deep dive is really kind of learning to know who you are.
Yeah.
And that's the greatest, that's the most difficult thing, I think, in today's world, especially with the last 4 years.
Yeah.
A lot of people really found themselves, and a lot of people just went the other way. Yeah, absolutely. It was very polarizing.
Yeah. And it's tricky, right? Because you can look at this one person at a time, but it's such a systemic issue, right? And it's funny, if you can take any man, any woman, anybody, and with the right coaching, and if you have a willing participant, they can heal, right? They can do it. You have the right coaching, the right program, willing participant, you're willing to do the work, you can heal. And you can do that one at a time. From a societal perspective, it's such a different animal. It's just such a big, and maybe that's the way it has to be fixed. It's just brick by brick, right? Maybe it's just one at a time.
Well, I just think, when you look at social conditioning, and it's like, even back in the UK, a pub on every corner. You went in pub, but then you kind of realize a lot of people go in pubs, they're pretty sad.
Yeah.
They're in the pub every night because they feel lonely.
Yeah.
And
they're not there laughing.
They're kind of drinking a few pints, and they're pretty lonely. But it's like, for me, the biggest trap is alcohol.
Sure.
Is because kids, you kind of tend to go out. It's kind of, as part of our social condition, you go out, you drink, you have sex, you go out, you party.
Yeah. You're
already creating a difficult relationship with yourself, but with other people as well.
Definitely.
With the relationships you can harness and develop is, so it's just interesting. I've worked with a lot of kids, and, especially in the youth justice system, where they can't remember what they did because they had a few drinks, but it's changed the course of their life.
Yeah.
And, meeting me, they've had the opportunity to build some character and get a grip on it, but it's so damaging out there.
Yeah.
Technology, drinking, the drugs. And back in the day, we partied with drugs. And I remember, in the 90s, with 91, with the drug culture, it was ecstasy, it was cocaine, it was acid, amphetamine, speed, and you look back, and I just remember that, being active, you was aware of you got your pipe prescription, but you was also aware of drugs like heroin, and just how people were, suffering.
Yeah.
And then, getting caught in the devil's grip with a drug like heroin. And that was back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Now you look at with fentanyl.
Oh my God.
You look at these drugs that are out now.
Yeah. It's
crazy. Just gone crazy. It's gone crazy.
It's insane.
So how do we expect to build strong youth to become strong men?
Well, and that's gonna be my next question. How do we do that?
Well,
Like,
I
what do
think
we do?
We got to go. So if it's an army, do you remember when the military, the boot camps?
Yeah,
You teach young people about themselves by getting them physical.
yeah,
What can you overcome?
yeah. Totally.
What real
Here's what you're made
strength-
of.
Yeah, what are you really made of? You're going to get the heart check, the gut check,
Yeah,
and you're going to push through.
yeah.
And when you push through,
So
you're going to
true,
find out
man.
more about yourself. And then when you push through, it's a bit like anything with impact. When life impacts you, you have a response to it.
It's so true,
Not
man.
always a
Like,
reaction. We got a snowflake generation. It's
Yeah.
sad to see.
It
It
is.
really
No, you're
is.
right.
It
You're right.
is. Come on.
Yeah.
You're wasting my time. You're wasting your own time.
Yeah.
And you kind of call that situation out, and it's like, and you're like, you've got so much potential.
yeah,
You have so much potential, but yet you're just not getting a grip on it.
yeah,
The simplest of things. And that's called a lot of the time common sense.
yeah.
Where did common sense go?
It's not that common
The
anymore.
sense to,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To
No,
feel
it's-
and sense,
you know-
it's like it's fascinating.
It's so interesting, Carl. Like when you break it down like that, because you're right. Like
and
you're
I
so
said
right.
And like I said to you,
Yeah.
technology is taking us into the world of artificial thinking.
Oh, for sure.
You know, when music was really created and live bands, and then all of a sudden we're all in this technology world of think, feel, do, rather than feeling and sensing and being. Think, feel, do. So, you know, we look at the world of mental health and the epidemic we have. For me, it's an epidemic of overthinking
Sure.
instead of just feeling and
Yeah.
being in your heart and collecting too much
Well-
data.
Well, and you can fool your brain into thinking that something's very real, right? Like, and you can use that in some really positive ways. I mean, Joe Dispenza talks about that, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you meditate the right way and you create your
Yeah.
own reality, your body will follow that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it can go the other way too.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, you talk about how easy it is to get lost in these video games.
Yeah.
You're reprogramming your brain.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
totally reprogramming.
Yeah.
And now, like with the virtual reality and things like that, I mean, like, you know, you can think this is pretty real pretty
nuts.
quick.
It's gone nuts.
It's gone nuts.
But I just think with our human technology is more powerful than anything.
Yeah.
Is that you've got rogue AI and you've got good AI.
Yeah.
You know, good AI, you know, the way the world is that is, you know, part of, you know, you look at the financial system and how we use technology is inspiring.
Sure.
I call it inspiratology. Then you look at negatology. So how do we utilize the double-edged sword? How do we utilize that technology?
Good without losing the bad. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But we got to get people out.
So yeah, we've got to get.
Yeah.
I think getting people
Get them
moving,
active. Yeah.
Get them active. Get people moving. Just to feel through life. Don't
Yeah.
just think through it. Overthinking is overthinking.
Yeah.
And it's like saying you haven't got a drinking problem. You got a thinking problem.
Right. And you know, like it is
You bring about where the mind goes, the energy flows. That's a fact.
like, as you're telling me this, like, you know, it's funny. Like, I didn't even think of some of this stuff, but you know, like our generation growing up, like, you know, kids, like you just did stuff. Like you were
Yeah.
active. You're out on your
Yeah.
bikes. You were riding. Like,
Yeah.
even if you weren't playing a sport, you're still active. You're doing stuff.
But there was less of the boogeyman
Right.
on the news. There
Oh
was
yeah,
less
for
fear.
sure. Yeah. So you go do
Fear-
stuff.
Fear came in through technology and
Sure.
games
Yeah.
and violence.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
really
there's more to
kinda-
it than that too.
Yeah,
It's,
absolutely. There is more to it. But when you look at the, you know, the concept of staying out late on the night,
Yeah.
you know, the neighbours, you would go in the neighbour's house. That's
Sure.
what they said. I mean, I lived on a funny farm in an house with 12 of us living in a big house, but I remember it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like there was a certain freedom to go out and play.
Sure.
You had
Go
to
do
be
it.
in bed.
Yeah.
You had to be in before the dark came, and you
Sure.
had to be in bed at
But that was your
yeah.
that was your call home.
That was
Sun's
it.
going
Yeah,
down.
yeah.
I gotta go.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know, it's funny because, you know, like the gym that I go to, that's this great big gym. And most of the men working out are, you know, like 35 or older.
Yeah.
So many of the women that are there
Yeah.
are young.
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong. Like there's women
Yeah.
in their 30s,
Yeah.
40s, 50s, 60s, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's very, there's just a handful of young men, like in their, you know,
Yeah.
late teens, early 20s.
Yeah.
Lots of women in that age,
Mhm.
right? They're more active. And then those same women are scratching around going like, you want me to date guys? Like, you know, if you're a woman in your early 20s, you look at their options in terms of the men that are their age, and they're like, this is what I get to choose from.
Well,
It's hard.
But you know, perspective is that a lot of men are not in touch with the feminine, so they're not in touch with their true power to move through
both.
emotion and deal.
Yeah.
So a lot of men are more in the masculine, but it's more in the head,
Right.
and the ego, and the whole concept of competing and comparing and gaining a reputation, and women see through that.
Yeah. Well, that's where toxic masculinity comes from. Yeah.
Well,
And that, unfortunately,
yeah.
that's the only masculinity they see is the toxic stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
they don't see the healthy kind.
But that's the reactive behavior.
That's just how it goes.
How to move that energy and become a soft power.
Yeah.
Knowing your soft power is being in your heart.
Yeah.
And the head, the heart. So, you know, how I look at it is that when we look at the left brain and we look at society and social conditioning and how people get stuck in their heads, in the old caveman software, is that what we have is a separation of the head and the heart is the inability to integrate the intellect with the intuition. So the intellect can be great. I can be, I can have a really good, but if I'm not integrating into that heart space, I'm not intuitive. I'm not in that heart space.
You're missing a big part of it.
So a lot of people are more, a lot of men are, they're kind of in tune in certain ways, but it's more from a kind of the ego perspective, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest thing. The hardest thing, if the ego's in the passenger seat, it's okay. But when it starts getting its hands on the wheel, you want to drop it off at the station.
Yeah. Take it somewhere else.
Goes, you may need a checkup from the neck up.
Right? Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Carl, name of your book. Say it again.
Activating Flow. So
where do we find it?
You can find it at Ion. You can go to EnergyWise, ENERGY, WIZ. So Wise with a Z, WIZE.ca, EnergyWise. So you can check out my work, my systems, my philosophy on there, the work I've done.
We'll make sure to put that link in the podcast. So if you're if you're listening to this, you want to know, it'll be in the bio of the podcast here. And super interesting conversation.
Yeah,
man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really good. Yeah.
Yeah, enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. This was great. Yeah, I hope we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, Carl. Okay, thanks, man.
Thank you.
It's great. Oh, good job, man. That was awesome.
Yeah, you enjoyed that?
Yeah, it's really good.
That was good fun.